somewhere between Neptune and Uranus. 4,000 warships moved through the darkness like a swarm of metal locusts. They had traveled for 6 months across the void, and now their destination glowed blue and white on every view screen. Earth, a world that had never seen real war. A world ripe for harvest. Admiral Renix studied the planet from his command chair aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. Some had fought back with nuclear fire. Others had surrendered before the first shot. All of them now belonged to the Dominari Empire. Earth would be no different. His tactical officer, a younger Dominari named Sol Lin, pulled up the intelligence reports. "Sir, our scouts intercepted their radio signals 80 years ago. They have basic nuclear weapons, chemical rockets, primitive satellite networks. Nothing that can threaten a proper warship." Renix made a sound of acknowledgement. The Dominari had built their empire by finding species like this. Young civilizations that had not yet learned to defend themselves. By the time they understood the danger, it was already too late. "How many population centers?" Renix asked. "Approximately 300 major cities. Total population around 8 billion. 8 billion workers for our mining colonies." Renix allowed himself a thin smile. "Signal the fleet. Standard conquest formation. We will be in weapon range within 2 days." 4,000 ships adjusted their positions with mechanical precision. They had done this many times before. The formation was designed to overwhelm planetary defenses, crush any resistance, and establish orbital superiority within hours. No primitive species had ever broken it. Far below, on a planet that seemed unaware of its coming doom, something stirred. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, past security checkpoints that did not appear on any map, Director Amara Webb received a notification on her personal terminal. She read it twice. Then she read it a third time because some messages required absolute certainty. Unknown contact detected. Count, approximately 4,000. Trajectory, earthbound. Formation, military. She had waited 15 years for this message. Part of her had hoped it would never come. Webb walked through corridors carved from solid granite, past rooms filled with equipment that officially did not exist, until she reached the main operations center. Dozens of technicians sat at workstations that monitored every corner of the solar system. They had seen the contacts too. The room was silent with controlled fear. "Confirm the count," Webb said. 4,012 vessels, Director. Largest is approximately 6 kilometers long. They matched the profile from the Siberia incident. The Siberia incident. 50 years ago, a small alien craft had crashed in the frozen wasteland of northern Russia. The pilot had died on impact, but the ship had remained mostly intact. Every major nation had sent scientists to study it. What they found had changed everything. The galaxy was not empty. It was full of hunters, and Earth was preyed in secret. Humanity had begun to prepare. Not openly, because panic would have destroyed civilization. Not separately, because division would have made them weak. Together, hidden from public view, every nation had contributed to a single project. They called it Blackout. Webb picked up a secure phone and dialed a number that connected to nowhere official. "This is Director Webb. Authorization code 770 Alpha. Wake up the architects." Across the planet, in bunkers and bases that the public would never know about, systems began to power up. Satellites that appeared dead came online. Installations on the Moon and Mars transmitted confirmation signals. Weapons that had waited in silence for half a century finally received their targeting data. On the Eternal Conquest, Solon noticed something odd on his sensor display. Thousands of small objects were rising from Earth's surface and accelerating toward the fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for chemical rockets. "Admiral," he said slowly, "I am detecting launches from the planet." Renix leaned forward. "Missile?" "It appears so, sir. Thousands of them." A younger officer laughed nervously. "Primitive projectiles? They will burn up before they reach us. Their technology cannot possibly threaten our shields." Renix did not laugh. He had conquered 12 worlds, and he had learned one important lesson: never underestimate desperation. A cornered animal was the most dangerous kind. Track them, he ordered. Calculate intercept time. Solin worked his console. His face grew pale. Sir, these missiles are not following standard trajectories. They are accelerating. Continuously. He looked up with confusion in his eyes. Admiral, nothing in our records suggests this species has technology capable of continuous acceleration. Renix felt something cold settle in his stomach. For the first time in his career, he experienced doubt. How fast are they moving? Solin checked the numbers 3 times before answering. 0.05 light speed, sir. And increasing. No primitive species built weapons that fast. No primitive species launched thousands of them at once. No primitive species stayed silent while an invasion fleet approached their world, unless they were not primitive at all. Renix stood from his command chair. All ships, raise combat shields. Prepare point defense systems. He stared at the blue dot on his view screen, and for the first time, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Where are you hiding, little world? Deep beneath the mountains, Director Webb watched the same missiles climb toward the stars. Beside her, a countdown timer marked the moments until first contact. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for this day. 50 years of secret weapons, hidden bases, and careful lies. 50 years of pretending to be harmless. The pretending was over. The missiles were not missiles at all. Admiral Renix learned this lesson the hard way when the first wave reached his fleet near the orbit of Uranus. His point defense systems locked onto the incoming projectiles and opened fire. Thousands of energy beams lanced out across the void, hitting their targets with perfect accuracy. The targets did not care. Instead of exploding, the small objects split apart. Each one became 10 smaller objects. Then those split again. Within seconds, the space around the Dominari fleet was filled with millions of tiny machines, moving too fast to track and too small to hit. What is this? Renix demanded, and O1 answered. No one knew. The machines reached the first line of Dominari ships and attached themselves to the hulls. For a moment, nothing happened. Renix allowed himself to hope that the human weapons had failed. Then the machines began to eat. They chewed through hull, plating like insects through wood. They ignored shields entirely, passing through energy barriers as if they did not exist. They burrowed into ships and found their reactors, their weapon systems, their life support. And wherever they went, they left destruction behind. The first ship to die was a cruiser called the Sword of Victory. Its reactor breached 3 minutes after the machines made contact. The explosion took out 2 more ships nearby. Then another reactor failed. Then another. In 90 seconds, 400 ships became expanding clouds of superheated debris. Renix watched his fleet burn and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real, primal fear. All ships, pull back, he screamed. Get us away from those things. The fleet scattered in disorder, breaking the careful formation that had conquered 100 worlds. Ships fled in every direction, trying to escape the swarms of tiny machines that hunted them through the dark. On Earth, deep in the mountain facility, Director Webb observed the carnage through sensor feeds relayed from hidden satellites. Beside her stood Colonel Dante Reyes, a military officer who had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. Nanite swarms, he said quietly. First generation. We have 6 more generations ready if these fail. They will not fail, Webb replied. Her voice carried no emotion. How many do we lose them? 400 confirmed kills. The swarm is pursuing the scattered ships. Estimated additional losses within the hour, 200 more. Webb nodded. 400 ships destroyed in under 2 minutes. No human casualties. The mathematics of survival had always been her specialty. Deploy the second wave, she ordered. On the dark side of the moon, in a base that had been built in secret over 30 years, massive doors opened in the lunar surface. More weapons rose toward the stars. These were larger than the nanite carriers. Faster, smarter. The Dominari had conquered species across 3 galaxies. They had seen weapons of every kind. Biological agents, nuclear fire, gravity manipulation, reality-bending technologies that made physics weep. They had never seen anything like human ingenuity focused entirely on destruction. Admiral Renix managed to rally 3,600 ships. He had lost 400 to the first attack, but his fleet still possessed overwhelming force. No primitive species could maintain such an assault. They would run out of weapons eventually. All ships, activate war barriers, he commanded. Maximum shield power. Nothing gets through. The Dominari war barrier was legendary. An energy shell that could withstand direct hits from planet-cracking weapons. No enemy had ever breached it. Sol Lin interrupted his confidence. Admiral, we are being hailed. Ignore it. Sir, the signal is cutting through our communication encryption. They should not be able to do that. Renix hesitated. A species that could bypass Dominari encryption was not primitive. A species that could build machines that ate starships was not primitive. Nothing about this invasion was going according to plan. Put it through, he said finally. The view screen flickered. A human woman appeared. She had dark skin and eyes that held no warmth. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, like someone discussing weather rather than war. Alien Fleet, this is Director Amara Webb of Earth Defense Command. You have entered restricted space. You have attacked with hostile intent. You have been identified as a threat to human survival. Renix opened his mouth to respond, but she continued without pause. You were given no warning because you deserve none. We know what your kind does to conquered worlds. We know about the slaves, the harvesting, the extinction of species you consider useless. Her eyes seemed to look directly at him through the screen. You will not do these things to Earth. You cannot stop us, Renix said, forcing confidence into his voice. We have thousands of ships. You have destroyed a fraction of our force. We will burn your cities and enslave your people, just as we have done to countless others. Webb did not blink. You misunderstand the situation, Admiral. We did not launch that attack to stop you. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. We launched it to count you. The transmission ended. Renix stared at the empty screen. To count them. What did that mean? Sol Lin provided the answer seconds later, his voice breaking with fear. Admiral, new contacts detected. The asteroid belt. There are thousands of installations powering up. They were hidden. We never saw them. The war barriers hummed with power around every ship. The Dominari fleet was protected by the most advanced shields in 3 galaxies. Colonel Reyes, watching from the moon, gave the order that would prove those shields worthless. Activate the silence field. Every Dominari ship went dark at once. Communication is the foundation of warfare. Without it, armies become mobs. Fleets become floating coffins. The Dominari had learned this truth 10,000 years ago, and they had built their empire on the principle that information was power. Humanity understood this better than anyone. The silence field activated across a region of space spanning millions of kilometers. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not destroy ships or kill crews. It simply made every form of communication impossible. Radio waves died. Quantum links collapsed. Even light itself seemed to move slower within its boundaries. 3,600 Dominari ships became 3,600 isolated islands, unable to see each other, unable to coordinate, unable to understand what was happening. Admiral Renix screamed orders that no one could hear. His tactical displays showed only static. His crew moved in panicked confusion, trying systems that had worked perfectly for centuries and finding nothing but silence that on other ships, captains made their own decisions. Some accelerated toward Earth, believing that aggression was the answer. Some slowed down, hoping to escape whatever trap had caught them. Some tried to turn around and flee. The formation that had conquered 100 worlds shattered like glass. From their positions among the asteroids, human weapons platforms watched the chaos unfold. They had waited 30 years for this moment. Engineers had built them in secret, launching components disguised as mining equipment and scientific probes. Politicians had lied to protect their existence. Soldiers had trained for battles they hoped would never come. Now the waiting was over. The platforms opened fire. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to 12% of light speed. At that velocity, A piece of iron the size of a fist carried more energy than nuclear bomb. The slugs crossed the distance to the Dominari fleet in seconds, too fast to track, too fast to dodge, too fast to stop. The war barriers that protected Dominari ships were designed to absorb energy weapons. Lasers, plasma, particle beams. They could shrug off attacks that would vaporize mountains. They had never encountered a solid object moving at 36,000 kilometers per second. The first slug hit a battleship called the Eternal Flame. It punched through the war barrier as if it did not exist, passed through the ship from bow to stern, and exited the other side. The Eternal Flame did not explode. It simply ceased to function. Every system failed. Every crew member died. The ship drifted onward, a tomb of metal and silence. More slugs followed. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one found a target. Each one killed. Colonel Reyes watched the destruction from his command center on the moon. His face showed no satisfaction. He had studied the Dominari records recovered from the crashed ship in Siberia. He knew what they had done to other species. The slaves worked to death in mines. The children taken for experiments. The entire civilizations erased because they were considered inconvenient. The Dominari did not deserve mercy. But Reyes took no pleasure in killing. He simply did what was necessary. Status report. Director Webb's voice came through his earpiece. 800 additional kills confirmed. Enemy fleet is in complete disarray. They cannot communicate or coordinate. Individual ships are attempting to flee in random directions. And the Prometheus? Reyes checked his display. A massive signature was moving from its hiding place behind Mars. En route. They will see it soon. Good. Let them see what we built while they thought we were primitives. Admiral Renix finally restored partial sensors on his flagship. What he saw made his blood freeze. His fleet had numbered 4,000 ships when they entered the system. Now, fewer than half remained. Wreckage filled the space around him. Ships drifted without power. Others had simply vanished, destroyed so completely that nothing remained. And behind them, blocking any hope of retreat, sat a wall of debris from their own destroyed vessels. How? He whispered. How did they do this? No one answered. His crew was too busy trying to survive. Then the sensors detected something new, something moving from behind the red planet that humans called Mars. Renix focused the remaining cameras on the approaching object and felt his heart stop. It was a ship. A human ship. But no species built ships that large. The vessel stretched 40 kilometers from end to end. Its hull bristled with weapons that made Dominari technology look like toys. Power readings suggested a reactor output equal to a small star. It moved with the lazy confidence of an apex predator that had never known fear. Solon managed to restore communication with a handful of nearby ships. His voice trembled as he reported, "Admiral, I am receiving identification from the human vessel. They call it the Prometheus." Renix knew the name. Prometheus was a figure from human mythology, a being who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mortals. Looking at the approaching dreadnought, Renix understood the meaning. Humanity had stolen something far more dangerous than fire. They had stolen the secrets of the universe itself. And now they were going to use those secrets to burn his fleet to ash. All ships, he broadcast on the few channels still working, form up on my position. We will not die scattered like prey. We will face this enemy together. It was a brave command. It was also pointless. The Prometheus had not been built to fight fleets. It had been built to end them. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood at its helm and gave the simplest order of her career. Main cannon. Fire. Light became death. The Prometheus main cannon fired a beam of concentrated plasma hotter than the surface of most stars. It crossed the distance to the Dominari fleet in an instant, moving at the speed of light because it was light. Pure, focused, apocalyptic light. The beam struck the first ship in its path and did not stop. It continued through the second ship, the third, the 10th, the 50th. Dominari war barriers, the greatest defensive technology in 3 galaxies, offered no more resistance than paper point 50 ships died in a single shot. Not damaged, not disabled, vaporized, turned to atoms in less time than it took to blink. Admiral Renix watched half of his remaining command line disappear and finally understood the truth. This was not a battle. This was not even a war. This was an execution. Captain Yuki Tanaka observed the results from her command chair aboard the Prometheus. She had spent 15 years training for this moment. 15 years of simulations, drills, and careful preparation. None of it had prepared her for the reality of killing so many beings so quickly, but she did not hesitate. The Dominari records were clear. Every species they had conquered had been enslaved or destroyed. Children taken from parents. Families separated forever. Entire cultures erased from existence because they were deemed worthless. Humanity would not share that fate. Reload main cannon, she ordered. Target the next concentration. The Dominari fleet did the only thing it could. It attacked. Every surviving ship turned its weapons toward the Prometheus and fired. Thousands of energy beams, plasma bolts, and missile salvos converged on the human dreadnought. The barrage would have cracked a moon. It would have burned continents. It represented more destructive power than most species had witnessed in their entire histories. The Prometheus absorbed it all. Human shields did not simply block energy. They converted it. Every shot the Dominari fired became additional power for human systems. Weapon capacitors filled. Engine output increased. The dreadnought grew stronger with every attack. They are feeding us, Tanaka observed. Continue firing. The main cannon discharged again. Another 50 ships vanished. The Dominari kept shooting, and the Prometheus kept absorbing, and the cycle of death continued without interruption. In his command center, Colonel Reyes monitored the battle and allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. 30 years of research had gone into those shields. 30 years of brilliant scientists working in secret, studying captured alien technology and asking one simple question: how do we survive against an enemy with superior numbers? The answer had been elegant. Do not fight energy with energy. Convert it. Use the enemy's strength as fuel. Turn their greatest advantage into their doom. Admiral Renix finally understood that fighting was pointless. His weapons only made the human ship stronger. His fleet was dying, and every death was meaningless. All ships, he broadcast, retreat. Maximum speed. Get us out of this system. The surviving Dominari vessels turned and fled. They scattered in every direction, hoping that at least some would escape to warn the Empire. The Prometheus could not chase them all. It could not be everywhere at once. But humanity had anticipated this moment too. Director Webb's voice came through on every human channel. Release the wolf pack. Throughout the solar system, hidden among moons and asteroids and debris fields, 300 small ships powered up their engines. They were called corvettes, but the name did not do them justice. Each one was a predator designed for a single purpose: hunting. The wolf pack emerged from hiding and began to chase. Renix detected them on his damage sensors. Small ships. Fast ships. Ships that moved with the coordinated precision of pack hunters closing on wounded prey. They have more, Solen whispered. How do they have more? Renix had no answer. 50 years ago, humanity had been a primitive species with chemical rockets and radio broadcasts. Now they fielded weapons that made Dominari technology look ancient. The transformation should have been impossible, unless the Dominari intelligence had been wrong from the beginning. Unless humanity had never been primitive at all. The wolf pack caught the fleeing ships one by one. They did not use the overwhelming force of the Prometheus. They were surgical, precise. They targeted engines and left ships stranded. They disabled weapons and watched crews panic. They turned the mighty Dominari fleet into a collection of helpless wrecks. Then the boarding parties arrived. Lieutenant Omar Hassan led his squad through the hull of a crippled battleship. They moved in perfect formation, weapons ready, expecting fierce resistance. Instead, they found terrified aliens huddled in corridors, too shocked to fight. Secure the bridge, Hassan ordered. Find their databases. Everything they know about their empire, their worlds, their slaves. We need all of it. His team worked quickly. The Dominari computer systems were advanced, but human hackers had spent decades preparing for this moment. Within minutes, they had full access. What Hassan found made his stomach turn. 200 conquered worlds. Billions of slaves. Species experimented on, worked to death, or simply eliminated when they became inconvenient. The Dominari were not just conquerors. They were monsters wearing the mask of civilization that he transmitted the data to Director Webb. Her response came quickly, her voice cold as space itself. New orders, Lieutenant. No prisoners. Hassan looked at the cowering aliens around him. Part of him hesitated. Part of him remembered that mercy was what separated humans from beasts. Then he remembered the files he had just read. The children, the camps, the mass graves. Understood, he said, and raised his weapon. Far away, Admiral Renix fled toward the edge of the solar system with only 200 ships remaining. Behind him, the wolf pack was finishing its work, but he did not yet know that escape was impossible. Every predator believes it is the deadliest thing in its environment. The Dominari had believed this for 10,000 years. They had conquered 3 galaxies. They had enslaved species that could bend reality and crush planets. They had never met anything that made them feel like prey, until now. Admiral Renix pushed his flagship to maximum speed. 200 ships followed him, the last survivors of an armada that had numbered 4,000. Behind them, the wolf pack hunted with patient precision. The human corvettes did not try to destroy the fleeing ships. They simply disabled them. An engine here, a navigation system there. Each surgical strike left another Dominari vessel stranded in the void, helpless and alone. Renix watched his numbers shrink and understood the strategy. The humans were not trying to win a battle. They were trying to prevent anyone from escaping. They were trying to ensure that no warning reached the Dominari Empire. How far to the system boundary? He demanded. Solon checked the navigation display. 6 hours at current speed, Admiral. But we will not make it. The human ships are faster. Then we fight. Turn and engage. Better to die with honor than be hunted like animals. Sir, we have tried fighting. It did not work. Renix knew this was true. The Dominari had thrown everything they had at the humans and accomplished nothing. Their weapons fed human shields. Their formations had been shattered by weapons they could not counter. Their technological superiority had proven to be an illusion. The humans had been preparing for this war for 50 years. The Dominari had simply walked into a trap on the dark side of the moon. Colonel Reyes coordinated the final phase of the operation. His displays showed every surviving Dominari ship, marked in red like drops of blood scattered across the solar system. Wolfpack 7, target the flagship's engines. Wolfpack 3, disable that cruiser's weapons. Do not let any of them reach the boundary. His orders were followed with mechanical precision. Human pilots had trained for years in simulators, practicing scenarios exactly like this one. They knew every weakness of Dominari ships. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly how hard, exactly when. The Dominari had conquered species with superior technology, but they had never faced an enemy that studied them so thoroughly. They had never faced an enemy that learned. Director Webb appeared on Reyes' screen. Status report. 150 ships disabled and drifting. Boarding teams are securing their databases and dealing with their crews. He paused. The flagship is still running. 200 ships with them. They will reach the boundary in 6 hours. They will not reach it in 6 minutes. Commander Cross is in position. Reyes looked at his display. A single human vessel sat at the edge of the solar system, directly in the path of the fleeing fleet. It was small, barely armed. It looked like nothing compared to the warships approaching it, but it carried something far more dangerous than weapons. Admiral Renix detected the lone human ship and felt a spark of hope. One small vessel against 200 warships. Even with their terrible weapons, the humans could not win that fight. Destroy it, he ordered. Clear the path. His ships opened fire. Missiles and energy beams streaked toward the tiny target. It should have been vaporized in seconds. Instead, the human ship activated a device that the Dominari had never seen before. Reality itself seemed to bend around the vessel. Space twisted, light warped, and every Dominari ship within 1 million kilometers found itself unable to move. The anchor had been humanity's most secret weapon. It created a field that locked ships into normal space, preventing any form of faster-than-light travel. The Dominari could still move with conventional engines, but their hope of escape had just vanished. Commander Nina Cross sat in her pilot's seat and watched the enemy fleet realize its doom. She had volunteered for this mission knowing it might be her last. The anchor required enormous power, and her ship's reactor was already overheating from the strain, but it would hold long enough. Alien fleet, she broadcast on all frequencies, you will not warn the others. You will not escape. You will not survive. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. I want you to understand something before the end. We did not want this war. We did not seek you out. We did not threaten your worlds or your people. You came to us. You came to enslave us. You came to destroy everything we had built. She paused, watching her reactor readings climb toward critical. This is what happens when you threaten humanity. This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. This is what happens when you try to hunt a species that spent its entire history learning to kill. The Prometheus appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving toward the trapped fleet like a god of war approaching its final judgment. Renix tried to hail the human dreadnought. He tried to surrender. He tried to offer tribute, alliance, anything that might save his people. Captain Ganaka did not respond. Director Webb had given clear orders. The Dominari had enslaved 200 worlds. They had murdered billions. They had shown no mercy to any species they encountered. They would receive no mercy in return. Commander Cross watched the Prometheus begin its final approach. Her reactor was failing. Her ship was dying. But she had done her job. The wolves had caught their prey. Now came the slaughter. 8 minutes. That was how long it took the Prometheus to destroy 200 warships. Admiral Renix spent those final minutes trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. His people had conquered 3 galaxies. They had crushed civilizations older than their own star. They had believed themselves invincible, and now they were dying, erased from existence by a species they had considered nothing more than future slaves. The main cannon fired again and again. Each shot carved through multiple ships. Each shot ended thousands of lives. The Dominari tried to scatter, but the anchor field held them in place. They tried to fight, but their weapons only fed human shields. They tried to surrender, but no one was listening. In the end, Renix stood alone on his bridge, watching the final approach of the weapon that would end him. He had time for one last thought before the light consumed everything. We should have left them alone. Then the Prometheus fired, and the last Dominari ship became dust. Director Webb received confirmation of total victory from her command center beneath the mountains. 4,000 ships destroyed. 0 human casualties. The invasion that should have enslaved humanity had been erased before it even reached Mars. She allowed herself 30 seconds of relief. Then she got back to work. Colonel Reyes, status on captured vessels. 3 Dominari ships secured intact. Director. Their databases are being analyzed now. We have full navigation charts for their empire, locations of their homeworld, their fleet bases, and all 200 conquered planets. What about survivors? Reyes hesitated. None, ma'am. As ordered. Webb nodded. The decision had not been easy, but it had been necessary. The Dominari could not be allowed to warn their empire. They could not be allowed to return with a larger force. They had chosen to be predators, and predators did not deserve mercy when they came for humanity's children. But the war was not over. It was just beginning point. 3 days later, Webb addressed the United Earth Council. The organization had been formed in secret 50 years ago, bringing together every nation for a single purpose: survival. Now that purpose had been achieved. The question was what came next. We have won this battle, Webb told the assembled leaders, but the Dominari Empire still exists. They control 200 worlds. They hold billions of slaves. And eventually, they will notice that their invasion fleet never returned. Then we prepare for the next attack, said the American representative. Build more ships. More weapons. More defenses. That is one option, Webb agreed. But I proposed something different. She activated a display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked Dominari territory. Blue dots marked their conquered worlds. Green dots mark humanity's solar system, tiny and alone. We know where their homeworld is. We know the locations of every slave planet. We have captured ships that can travel faster than light. Webb looked at each council member in turn. We can hide and wait for the next invasion, or we can take the fight to them. Free the slaves. Destroy the empire. Make sure no one ever threatens Earth again. Silence filled the chamber. What Webb proposed was not defense. It was a war of liberation on a galactic scale. Can we win such a war? The Chinese representative asked. Captain Tanaka answered. She had been invited to speak as the commander of the Prometheus. The Dominari built their empire by conquering species that could not fight back. They have never faced an enemy that hunted them. They have never faced humanity. She smiled coldly. We spent 50 years preparing to defend our home. Imagine what we can do with 50 years of offense. The vote was unanimous. 1 year later, a human diplomatic vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel above a world called Harmony. The planet had been enslaved for 2,000 years. Its people had forgotten what freedom meant. They had never known anything except Dominari masters and Dominari cruelty. When they detected the unknown ship, they expected punishment. The Dominari did not tolerate unauthorized contact. Someone would die for this transgression. Someone always died. Instead, they received a transmission. Captain Tanaka's voice carried across their world, broadcast on every frequency, reaching every city and every slave camp and every hidden pocket of resistance that had never stopped hoping. People of Harmony, this is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Earth vessel Prometheus. We are humans. We come from a world called Earth, far across the galaxy. 1 year ago, the Dominari sent a fleet to enslave us. They failed. She paused, letting the words sink in. We have destroyed their invasion force. We have captured their technology. We have learned the locations of every world they have conquered. And we have come to tell you something that no one has told you for 2,000 years. On the surface below, billions of beings stopped what they were doing. Guards and slaves alike listened to the voice from the stars. You are free. The message spread across the planet. Then it spread beyond, carried by hidden communicators and whispered chains of hope. Within days, every slave world in the Dominari Empire knew that something had changed, that a new species had risen. They came not to conquer, but to liberate. They came not to enslave, but to protect. They came with weapons that could crack worlds and technology that could reshape civilizations. And they were coming for everyone. In the years that followed, the Dominari Empire fell. World after world was freed. Species that had known only chains learned to stand upright again. The galaxy changed forever, and at the center of that change stood a small blue planet that had once been dismissed as primitive. Humanity had always been dangerous. Now the universe knew it, and they would never forget.